Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Diana, and I am the Global Blockchain Business Council's Head of Research and Sustainability. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the GBBC's Virtual Members Forum on preparing Web3 for Web2, easing the transition for enterprises and individual developers. We are a bi-weekly webinar showcasing the innovative work of our members around the world. And today we are joined by Saurabh Radhakrishnan from zbyte. zbyte is a GBBC member that focuses on bridging the gap between Web2 and Web3 by simplifying the development process. dPlat, which is zbyte's flagship, is a decentralized platform that allows enterprises and developers to build decentralized applications, dApps, across multiple different blockchains. Saurabh will unpack the reality of Web3 and share why tools like dPlat are necessary for blockchain adoption. And briefly, before we begin, I'm going to introduce Saurabh, who is a serial entrepreneur. He has started companies associated with cutting-edge technologies, and he specializes in bringing highly technical solutions to the market and solving difficult real-world problems by making usable products. Saurabh is an advisor to various startups in health tech and e-commerce as well. And he is an avid blockchain and metaverse entrepreneur and fan, as well as an investor in cryptocurrencies and the new economy assets. We welcome your questions at any point during today's presentation. So please submit them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will take them after the presentation. And welcome, Saurabh. Thank you for joining us. And I'll hand things over to you to begin.
Thanks a lot, Diana. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate GBBC having us here. Let me just share my screen so I can get some slides out there. All right, great. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how we're preparing Web3 for Web2. There's a lot of talk around how, there isn't adoption in the Web2 world of Web3. And we believe firmly that it's actually because Web3 is not yet ready for Web2. There's quite a few hurdles that need to be overcome before the Web2 world actually starts adopting Web3. And it's primarily the enterprises and the individual developers who need that help. And so let's dive in a little bit into what we'll be talking about. We're going to talk about why Web3 really isn't ready for prime time just yet, and how a decentralized platform can help, and how zbyte is really helping make that transition. We're going to talk about the decentralized app store that we're creating along with it, why dPlat is needed at the end of the day, some of the use cases, and finally, we're going to go over a quick demo. This is like a sneak preview demo video, never before seen actually, of what we're actually going to be putting out there in sometime soon. So why is it that enterprises and developers haven't adopted blockchain? Well, let's start with the developer aspect. There's three primary reasons we believe that developer ecosystem hasn't adopted blockchain. The first being that blockchain protocols are difficult to build on. An example we like to use is if I gave you TCP/IP and told you go build the internet, that's not something that's straightforward by any sense, right? And that's kind of where we believe blockchain protocols are right now. They're raw, they require a lot of low-level languages such as Solidity or Rust. These are not commonly used languages among the developer community. The second is the wallet management, the complexity of the wallet management. It's, it's not straightforward, it's difficult to use. You have to write down your 24-word seed phrase, store it. And there is an insecurity in that if you lose your 24-word seed phrase, it's gone. You would never have access to your wallet ever again. And finally, there's silos between blockchains. Different blockchain developers right now have selected a community and said, I am going to build on this blockchain. But to be able to really spread that adoption across communities, blockchains need to be able to talk to each other. And that's just not the case right now. And with that comes the lack of applications that are actually interoperable. Being able to use applications across blockchains would really be a game changer for developers, and that just doesn't exist right now. Now, let's just dive into why enterprises haven't adopted blockchain. In addition to all of the pieces I just mentioned for developers, there's two specific pieces there. One is that Web3 doesn't talk to Web2. there's no integration into traditional systems where, systems like CMO management tools, CRMs, databases, any of that information you would want to use to actually create smart contracts, create applications that interact with the blockchain, but where the data sits not on the blockchain itself. And actually, CFOs also hate cryptocurrency, right? Right now, unless you're Michael Saylor or Elon Musk, you don't want cryptocurrency on your balance sheet. That's just not, with the volatility and the implications from a regulatory standpoint, it's just not what CFOs are open to from a risk standpoint. So that's where we believe we're able to help bridge that gap with what we're calling a decentralized platform, or dPlat. And let's talk a little bit about the components, and I'm going to dive into each of these components right after this. So first, all of what we build is on public permissionless blockchains, right? And it all sits around a low-code, no-code module. So this is basically, without actually having to write code, think drag and drop, fill in the blanks, you can go ahead and create blockchain-enabled applications. And this is surrounded by pieces from end to end, including things like multi-chain support. We remove that silo that I was talking about earlier by allowing developers to build applications that go across blockchains. We also have Web2 to Web3 connectors for identity and system of records, and I'll dive into that in just a bit. And enterprise fiat pricing model. Basically, we're taking away the complexity that I was talking about for CFOs to actually hold cryptocurrency on their balance sheet. Instead, we offer them a model they're used to. And finally, we have a universal dApp store with interoperability between chains. So let's dive into the low-code, no-code interface for developers, right? It's for any developer. The goal of this interface is for any, what we're calling a citizen developer, to be able to build dApps so that they can address different use cases. We're also helping guide them to the right pre-built contracts so that they can pick and choose the right functions within contracts to connect to their applications. So for example, if they wanted to mint an NFT, we would guide them to the right NFT contract that would allow them to do that. We also allow them to leverage some existing Web2 infrastructure to build the native dApps without any of the hassles, and allow them to easily publish it. And this comes hand in hand with our dApp store, the ability to create all the way from backend, so let's call it a backend, a smart contract, to a front end with the UI, all the way to publishing it to an app store where a user can then come and download that application and use it. That end-to-end seamless process, that's something we are enabling. We're also kind of getting the community involved because there's a lot of applications, a lot of smart contracts. So we want the community to be able to contribute smart contracts to our platform, and they should be able to monetize that. And finally, we're making it easy for the user and the developer to run all of this without some complex wallet management. So let's just dive a little bit further into some of these connectors that I was talking about earlier. So we allow developers to use existing identities, your Gmail, some of your socials like Twitter or Facebook, to be able to log in and actually use the interact with the blockchain. And then from an enterprise perspective, that becomes their sole identity. In an enterprise, it's usually your email address, right? And so for them to be able to easily interact with the blockchain, we take away some of that complex wallet management and focus on identities. We also integrate in with some of the Web2 systems of records. And so just really quickly diving into those, we're enabling easy onboarding onto the blockchain with existing Web2 identities, Active Directory-based authentication for enterprises, and then multi-factor authentication that we're all used to with your phone or your email, so that you have a secure and validated experience and you don't lose that 24 seed phrase key, and instead can actually do this in a more, let's say, traditional way. On the connector side, specifically on the enterprise connector side, we offer the ability to integrate and leverage existing secure systems within decentralized applications, integrations that exist critical business applications such as CRMs, e-commerce, marketing automation, and off-chain data storage, because there is data, for at least from an enterprise perspective, that you would not want all exposed to the entire world on a public blockchain. And so we actually are able to segregate that data for you, so you put only what you want onto the blockchain. As I mentioned, we do offer multi-chain support. We want developers to be able to build and deploy on the most suitable chain for you. For some applications, the most suitable chain may be something that's the cheapest, but for others, there's security requirements. And so, because blockchains have specificities to each one. We want developers to have that option. And we want them to be able to access the communities that build, use, are loyal to, and to different protocols. So being able to deploy an application that is able to run on 3 or 4 different blockchains, that allows them to access that community base. And to kind of round all of this out, we're creating the ability to use only one currency instead of having to worry about all these different tokens that are native to all these different protocols. And so with just one token, which is the zbyte token, you're able to actually pay for the protocol fees for all the underlying blockchains that you deploy your application to. And finally, with our smart contract factory, contracts are actually executed as planned. You don't have to worry about issues, leaks, etc. We actually help handle all of that. And then for enterprises, of course, it is business as usual. We're taking away some of that, the inability to handle cryptocurrencies, the volatility, the lack of clarity. And so we give them no crypto on your balance sheet. You just pay in fiat. You don't need to go buy and sell tokens on exchanges. And we give you a fixed transaction cost in fiat for that. And finally, we have our universal dApp store. This is where we want to really help create that creator community where developers can come in, they can build on the dPlat using our low-code, no-code platform, deploy it to an app store, right? And then finally have users come in and start using the decentralized application to monetize. No different than the app store we're all used to. It needs to be a one-stop shop where all of this can happen. We're developers who are not particularly, let's say, technically savvy in the blockchain world can come in and implement their business applications. So just diving a little bit into use cases, all of this is great, but why? Why do we need blockchain? What are the good use cases that come out from it? One of them is an NFT platform, right? It's a very easy way of building use cases or a very good application on the dPlat will be a mint, mistransfer, destroy, and track contract associated with a front end, where you can do all of these things with a few clicks of a button. There's a couple of other use cases that will be able to be built: sustainability tracking, and reducing carbon impact to lower environmental effects, gain customer loyalty and government benefits from an enterprise's perspective. Supply chain track and trace, tracking inefficiencies, improving ROI, managing quality risk. The escrows between parties, and traditionally right now an escrow requires you to work with a bank where if a buyer and seller, for example, are selling and buying a house, during that transaction, money is transferred. And if they're waiting on, say, the structural engineer's report, once the structural engineer's report comes in, then the transaction occurs. All of that bank's functionality can actually be replaced by a smart contract, and all of that logic can be actually coded into dPlat. Product provenance identification, which ensures that items bought on the primary and secondary market are not counterfeit, they're the originals and authentics. And finally, cross-metaverse asset management, with metaverse really growing with a lot of expected value to be created in the next 3 to 5 years. Being able to create, sell, and transfer digital assets between different metaverses will be very key. And so that's something that dPlat is also going to support. So just a quick look at the product architecture here, right? So we kind of break it down into 3 pieces. We break it down into the core, the bridge, and the community. The core is the Web3 interaction and management layer. This includes things like the multiple blockchain support that I mentioned, the wallet management, the smart contract registry, where you have all the different smart contracts that you can go access, and the functions within those, metering and events, and finally the tokenomics. All of this basically is how we interact with the Web3 layer. Now, as we mentioned, Web2 and Web3 don't talk. And so that's why we built out the bridge layer. This connects the Web3 and the Web2 world. This is things like identity management, user management, consortium management, pricing in fiat, all of the things that a Web2 traditional enterprise or developer would want to see to make that transition easier. And finally, we have the community piece. This is the low-code, no-code dApp builder. We want the community involved because no one company can build out all the different modules, connectors, and functionalities to really make a decentralized platform at scale successful, right? There's all these different use cases that will need all these different modules. And so, some of the things we want the community to come in and build is low-code, no-code modules. We want them to build out smart contracts for different chains. We want them to actually contribute to the dApp store. We want them to build out connectors that connect Web2 and Web3, right? Microsoft Dynamics, SQL, et cetera, et cetera. We will have a set that we initially support, but as enterprise and individual developer needs grow, we want the community to be able to really contribute for that and also get rewarded for that. So that's kind of how we look at the architecture. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. It's a quick sneak preview of the dPlat. As a demo video recording. Give me one moment to just change screens. All right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. So I'll kind of talk through what this video shows, right? And so really just starting out, when you get to the dPlat, the first thing you can do is actually log into the dPlat using your standard IDs, like I mentioned, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, etc. So what we're going to do is actually log in using Microsoft, right? Using your Office 365 ID. And actually it takes you over to this page. This is let's say your dashboard. This dashboard allows you to create applications and then use them if you so desire. And so really diving into this piece, we're going to create a new decentralized application. And you have three pieces here, three components. You have widgets, functions, queries, JavaScript, and data sources. And so as you will see, we can edit the name of the application and then start building out the front end using the widgets functionality. And so we're going to build a very simple application here, which allows you to mint an NFT from a link, right? And so the first thing you need to do is build out the front end. We're going to start with a form. We can adjust the view that it's going to be built off of, and then make some changes to the names. So just diving a little further through this, we're going to have it, you need an input. So obviously in this step, you create let's say a place where you can put in a link for a image, video, basically any NFT you want to tokenize, right? A game 3D animation character, whatever it is. And you can go ahead and actually put that link in here. And when you hit the submit button, it'll actually mint the NFT, right? Sorry about that. Yeah. And so going back, we're going to actually now attach the smart contract that's going to be here. So just pausing on this really quick. This is our smart contract factory. This is going to have, the tens and eventually hundreds and thousands of smart contracts that zbyte or developers have created and uploaded so that you can use them as a template. And so here you see, for example, a marketplace smart contract may have functions like buy, sell, transfer. An NFT smart contract will primarily have three functionalities. It'll be mint, transfer, and destroy, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to select the NFT smart contract. And these different smart contracts will be on different chains and accessible via which chain you want to build on, or multiple chains if you want to build on. And so we're going to go ahead and select the NFT smart contract. We're going to rename it to whatever we'd like to rename it to. We're going to hit save. So now we've created that NFT smart contract and we want to actually choose a function from it. So we're going to name this the mint method and choose the function mint. We're going to attach this actually to the image.txt. So that so back in the UI, you actually saw the this is where the mint function basically gets attached to, right? And so as you can see, you can make any visual adjustments as needed to make that front end really easily accessible. Really with the UI, UX, all of that kind of design piece as well. And so what you see here is, for example, this piece, this button, we're actually doing a let's call it a low code functionality where you reset it if someone hits the reset button. And the mint button, as I mentioned, is about to be set up. It's been linked already. And basically you go ahead and select an action from the smart contract that we selected. That's mint. And what we can do is if there's a successful mint, then we'll show a message. And if there's an unsuccessful mint, then we'll show a message. And that's it. Now we can go ahead and deploy this application. Okay, so what you saw so far was basically we logged in via our Office 365 email. A wallet was created for us in that process so that now we can interact with the blockchain. We used a drag and drop capability to actually create the front end of the decentralized application. We went to select the smart contract, attached it to the front end to actually create a blockchain interaction, and then we deployed the application. So now what we can do is paste any image URL. So we'll have a URL come up in a second. And this is any URL on IPFS, and we're going to go ahead and hit the mint button. And that showed the mint was successful. So we can actually go trace this mint on a Explorer and actually see that it was successful. Okay, so just stopping the share now. So that's kind of what we're building out. Let me just share my screen once more. I just want to go through a quick key takeaway slide based on what we talked about, and then I would open it up for the questions. So quick key takeaway, right? Web3 needs Web2 for the exponential growth, we believe, and dPlat aims to help facilitate this growth. Because we're able to remove some of these adoption hurdles, that's how we're actually enabling enterprises and individual developers to start adopting Web3 who are not currently in there. And finally, we believe the community will really help enable exponential growth of dPlat components for different use cases. Just a quick look at our socials. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. This was a really interesting presentation, and I have a number of questions that were provided that I can read out and we can discuss. So the first question would be, what would you recommend to an organization looking to shift into the world of Web3?
So, I mean, it depends on which field they are, right? But I think the big value that's added by Web3 and blockchain is the trust factor for the end user or between different enterprises to be able to trust each other. Right now, we rely on actual contracts, but I believe if there's enough automation, traceability, transparency that the blockchain offers, that will help enable all of that trust to trickle through. So as an example, from a social media perspective, if you're a social media company, having your end customer not be the data, but actually be the owner of the data, and they get monetized, they get remunerated for being able to share that information with you. That's a transition to Web3 that would be very interesting. That's an example. Another one would be from an enterprise to enterprise standpoint, something like supply chain tracking, right? If you're Boeing and you require 500 different pieces just to build one small part of the plane, and the failure of any of those could have severe effects. You want to make sure that all the QA QC has been done very clearly, has been very well recorded, et cetera, et cetera. So you would use something like a smart contract or put that information on the blockchain so that there is a transparency and immutability to it that can be traced back later.
Excellent. What have you noticed are the biggest challenges that companies face in shifting to Web3?
So there's a couple of those. That's the ones we're hoping to address. One of them is that Web3 and Web2 don't talk, as I mentioned, right? The ability to take data that already exists on enterprise systems. I mean, there's massive amount of data, and being able to use those in a blockchain related context, that's not enabled right now. And so we're hoping some of the connectors we build out should help enable that. The other piece is, of course, digital assets sitting on a balance sheet for a enterprise. Enterprises don't like having digital assets on their balance sheet because the way to handle them, the accounting, the regulatory implications, and just the pain of opening up exchange accounts and all of that is not something they're willing to do. So paying off a public protocol, which does need the coin, whether it's an Ethereum or a Polygon or whatever, you need to then have to go buy those cryptocurrencies. They're not willing to do that. They're not willing to help make that transition. And also, I think there is a case to make that the enterprises need to very clearly see the return on investment, right? It's not just use technology for the sake of using cool technology. The use case and the return of investment of that use case has to be very clear. So I think there is also an education step that needs to happen and has actually started happening.
Exactly. That's fantastic. And in that context, what makes dPlat a more user-friendly experience for organizations shifting to Web3?
So it's a combination of things, right? So if an enterprise wants to right now start building on a blockchain, they have to go hire an entire team that's focused on Rust, Solidity, et cetera, on the programming side, and then understanding wallet management, understanding cryptocurrency management, all of that. That's too difficult. So what dPlat does is it takes away that complexity. With the low code, no code, with the fiat only payment for an enterprise, taking all of those different pieces and putting them, let's say, under the same roof, right? All the way from being able to log in using my enterprise email address to deploying an application either on the App Store for an end consumer or deploying an application to interact with on my own portal for an end consumer. Taking all of that and putting it under one umbrella, that's how we're taking away some of those complexities.
Mm-hmm. So why would a large organization choose dPlat over traditional apps to use?
So if you want a blockchain-enabled application, as I mentioned, enterprises need to transition to Web3 because of the way data ownership and the transparency and immutability of blockchain helps. If they want to access some of that value add that comes from blockchain usage, or with the way privacy is growing, the ability for a user who's generating their own data to own their data and be able to monetize it. If you want to participate in how that world is transitioning, you need to start moving into the blockchain-enabled world. And for that, dPlat is your best option, I believe, right now, rather than hiring a team to do all of that.
Right. So say I want to use dPlat. Do I need a non-custodial wallet or a custodial wallet? And would I need to connect to an external wallet? How does that work?
Okay, so that's interesting. So if you're on the enterprise side, so we kind of have two models here, right? We have the open source side, where we're actually gonna, at some point host the dPlat open source. There, it's a completely non-custodial wallet. Actually, on both sides, it's non-custodial, but there it's a non-custodial wallet. You have ownership of your wallet, and you pay in zbyte tokens. On the enterprise side, what we're doing is actually by taking away that complexity of cryptocurrency on the balance sheet, we're allowing enterprises to just not worry about custodial and non-custodial. It's their wallet is their wallet. They're doing what they need to do. And for example, when they mint an NFT, they're the ones who own that NFT, and then they can transfer it to their customers or whatever it may be, right? And they don't have to worry about the cryptocurrency being in their wallet or anywhere around their wallet. So they're completely separated away from that regulatory landmine.
So that streamlines it a lot and makes it easier. So do you think every organization would onboard to Web3? Why and why not?
Not every organization. You can't put blockchain into every single use case as much as we would like to, right? There are use cases with that trust factor, that immutability and transparency they're very good use cases for that. But not all use cases require that. There's a lot of traditional use cases that may not require that blockchain application. They're solved very well on Web2. Here's how we see it, right? Web2 solves problems very well today. There are certain use cases where Web3 can add on to Web2. There aren't going to be in the future, in my opinion, Web3 only or Web2 only use cases. There's going to be Web2 only use cases and then Web2 plus Web3 use cases. And that's going to be like a Web2 plus Web3 exponential growth where the asset ownership and all of that adds on to what already exists. Something like CRM, right? What we're seeing is a transition from customer relationship management to ownership relationship management, where the data you gain from a customer's interaction with your material isn't data that you that's just taken from the customer. The customer is not your product. The data they generate becomes something they can share with you. And so that's an example of, you know, where that transition is really happening, where you get that exponential growth of Web2 plus Web3.
This is so interesting. And we're talking a lot about the benefits and the upside of this innovation and this tool that you've presented. Why don't we talk a little bit about, like, when something goes wrong, what happens? This is very interesting, but we also have to know who is liable, for example, when there's a hack or when something goes wrong, when something is unintended or wrongfully, like there's bad actors out there. That has been a big concern.
That's an interesting question. So, you know, the smart contract that go onto the dPlat are going to be audited, security audited. We don't want any of what you just said to happen, right? Now, if there is a hack to an underlying protocol that dPlat does support, this is why we have interoperability. We want to offer our customers the access to all of the best blockchains out there. If there is a blockchain that suddenly becomes unusable, we want them to easily be able to port over to a different blockchain. And that's why interoperability becomes so important, especially if you're an enterprise, right? You never have only one vendor as an enterprise. You always have 2 or 3 backups. It's the same thing. You can never have just one protocol. I should be able to easily transition from protocol A to protocol B and C if something goes wrong with protocol A. And so from that perspective, you know, you asked specifically about liability. On the blockchain side, you know, we're making it clear that, you know, we have no control over how a blockchain operates, but on the smart contracts uploaded to the dPlat, we're going to make sure they're all security audited.
What about with concerns regarding layer ones? Regarding security, downtime, including hacks? What about when something goes wrong on that end?
Yeah, so that, as I mentioned, that's not something, so we cannot control that. We don't have control over that. But what we do want to offer is the ability to transition away from one that has
blockchain
or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for this extremely insightful presentation, Saurabh. We really appreciate you sharing your insights as an experienced tech entrepreneur. I'm Diana, Head of Research and Sustainability for GBBC again, and we really look forward to learning more about zbyte's progress moving forward. A recording of this presentation will be circulated to all those who registered, and it will also be shared publicly on GBBC's YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.